The cycle of life and death is endless, but beauty incarnates at every turn, all while a pure spirit watches over this world. Hi, this is Bethany, and this is my video for the second round of the 2017 NYX Face Awards. For this round, we were given the theme of Animal Kingdom. We were told we could create anything from the land to the sea to the sky, and even fictional creatures. And although deer makeup is a very common thing, I was very much inspired by Princess Mononoke and Lord of the Mountain found on Zelda Breath of the Wild. So with that inspiration, I bring you this ethereal spirit that watches over the life cycle of the earth. My look includes ethereal deer makeup on my face, illustrations on my chest, and these antlers that I built that span 2.5 feet wide that took my whole life to make. A condensed antler tutorial will be towards the end of this video, and if you like my look enough that you want me to go to the next round, please vote up to 3 times a day per email. The links and dates will be listed below. So whether you want to become an ethereal woodland creature, or you just want a more impressive and majestic antler span, just keep watching. So to begin, I pull back my hair and then I'm going to moisturize my skin with Tatcha's water cream. It's clarifying and it helps fight excess oil, which is ideal for my greasy skin type. I'm sure to let this absorb fully before I move on to the next step. Then I'm using a glue stick to glue down the tail end of my eyebrows and setting each layer with NYX's HD Studio powder. Once that's nice and smooth, I'm going to be using NYX's Dark Circle Concealer just to conceal the rest of those hairs. Then moving on to NYX's SFX Cream Paint in white, I'm going to be placing this all over the lower 2/3 of my face, first using a brush and then smoothing it out with a beauty sponge. Next, I'm going to be adding a little bit of cream paint to the top of my forehead and smoothing it out with NYX's foundation brush. I'm doing little swipe tap motions. And anytime I use a cream paint product, I set it with NYX's SFX Loose Setting Powder. Then I'm going in with these 2 lovely shadows, starting with the primal shadow in Hot Blue and then transitioning to the more purple shade in Ultraviolet and bringing that around down the contour area of my cheekbone. Then I'm going to continue this little rainbow gradient I have going on using these 2 primal shadows, one in Hot Fuchsia and one in Hot Pink. Then I peach out the middle of my face using Sweet Spring and Soft Flush. I promise it will look less weird later. Then I prime around my eyeball using NYX's Flesh Toned Primer. Then for the eyes, we're going to be using NYX's Warm Neutral palette. I first used this soft tan color as a transition shade all around the eye, laying down my general shape. Next is a dusty beige shade I use to deepen everything I've done, especially on the outer edge of the eye and up underneath the beginning of my eyebrow. Then combining some rich mahogany shades, I'm going to be going in even deeper to intensify those areas. Before we finish up shadow, I'm going to need to actually define a deer-like shape to my eye, so I'm using the slide-on liner in Nebula and bringing down my tear duct a bit. I'm also using that around the outer edges of the eye too, and setting both areas with my ultraviolet eyeshadow. Then hopping back to the palette, I'm taking this beautiful Rush shade, applying it on my lid and all around the underneath of my eye. After that, I'm dipping into NYX's Creme paint again and using that as a white eyeliner to open up the bottom half of my eye and make it look like my eye is tilting downward, the way a deer's eye do. I then drag the rust shade all around that white part that I created, and I redefine that shape using my purple eyeshadow. Then I'm re-establishing some intensity around my eyeshadow and then going in on my eyebrows with blending brushes because I want these laid down soft at first, and then I'm dragging down a contour from the nose. So to make my glowy little deer nose, I'm working backwards from the colors I used on my face, first beginning with the corals and the pinks, and then making things more intense as we get to the bottom of my nose and my nostrils. Then I'm going in with a fuchsia, and then I eventually move to the purple and bring a little line down to my lip. Not all the way though, because I don't want it too intense. And then lastly, I'm going to be using that hot primal blue just to intensify right where my nostrils are. Then once I'm done contouring, I'm going to be dipping back into that cream paint and I'm going to be creating my white little glowy deer nose, and all the contrast around it will make it look kind of ethereal and magical. I also shade around my upper lip to kind of make the sides of my mouth upturned like a smile, but I'm going to come back to lips later once I put that on. And then next, you may have noticed that my eyebrows are neither sisters nor twins, but rather third cousins twice removed that do not speak to each other anymore. I need to make them more symmetrical, so I'm going to go in and fix things up with a little bit of cream paint and purple eyeshadow. Then I stop to put in circle lenses, which are going to make my eyes look way huger, and then I go back in with that purple eyeshadow again. Next, I'm going to be taking the NYX's Epic Ink Liner and redefining those lines around the white part of my eye, and then lining my upper lash line to prepare for false lashes. After a gentle coat of NYX's full-figured mascara, I'm going to be using the Wicked Lashes in Popular. These lashes give me a flared look, making my eye extend outward and upward, which is what I was needing for that doe shape. Then hopping over to the body, I'm using NYX's Slide-On Liner in Pure White, so here we go. I lay out the design and then I fill in areas with white water activated paint instead of cream since I'm wearing a dress with this. Then I'm going to be going in with this blue eyeshadow shade from the Avant Pop Art Throb palette. It's very bright blue. I probably should have used it on my head too, but you know, life. Then I'm going in with those pink shades that I used up on the face, using primarily the fuchsia. Then lastly, I'm using that peachy coral and diffusing that around the edges. For the chest design, I had two symmetrical foxes, cause you know, they're mates. I picture the one on the left is the boy. Anyways, I'm using this slide-on liner in pink cantaloupe to fill this in, and then using the red slide-on liner in red tape for some edges and diffusing that with pink cantaloupe. I used the white cream paint to fill in their little beards and white underbellies and highlight some edges. But before I finish the middle portion, I'm going to be moving over to these twin peacock tails I had. I'm using the Full Throttle Shadow Stick in Cold Fear, and then I'm going to darken the edges, or some of the edges, in the slide-on liner in deep blue. Then I go in with some blue shading with eyeshadow, and then I'm using Poison Proper from the Full Throttle Shadow Stick line as well to add some of those feather tips. I set the feather tips with a bit of the prismatic eyeshadow in Venom. Then I add small touches of the slide-on liner in Glitzy Gold. I highlight some edges with that white cream paint, and then I solidify them with a bit of darkness using the Epic Ink Liner again. This has a pointed brush tip so I can get very tiny, precise lines. That's why I drew the little eyes with it. Next, I'm going to be starting on the picture in the middle of my chest. I have a tree of life sitting on a solitary island in a body of water. I'm using the slide-on liners in Azure and Sunset Blue to fill in that water, and then using the Full Throttle Shadow Stick in Double Trouble for the green. For the tree trunk, I use the slide-on liner in Brown Perfection. I also use Venom a bit to amp up that green. And then to fill in my sunset, I'm using the Ultimate Brights palette, which has a whole rainbow of shades to use. Then I'm going in with that Epic Ink Liner again and making some edges completely dark, though not all of them, because it would just make the look a little too intense. And I feel like making a few edges here and there black gives a watercolor effect to the rest of the painting. It did get too intense around the edge of my design, so I did use that gold liner to go over it and soften it a bit. Then I'm using the white cream paint to create some sweeping lines throughout the design, curling and flattering this little upside down teardrops shape I have. I also add some highlights to my design and tree, and if they're too intense, I tap them out with my finger. I use some white water activated paint and I carry these sweeping, swirling lines up my neck and body. These are inspired by the Lord of the Mountain on Zelda Breath of the Wild, who has some sort of tribal-esque looking designs on his horse body. And then using white cream paint and Q-tips, I'm creating little circular spots all over my body. I'm twisting the Q-tip as I apply the cream paint. This will give me a more even application. Then I'll be using NYX's white liquid liner to be dotting in between those spots. This will give me a more whimsical, majestic look. I think it's a lot prettier. I do some symmetrical dots at the front and rear of my eyebrows, if eyebrows have a rear, I suppose. Then back to the lips, I'm using the liquid suede in Submersive Socialite. I'm basically ignoring the fact that I have a cupid's bow and skimming over it to make the upper lip more full like a deer's. I ombre that down and set the edges with that bronze shadow from earlier, and add a 3D highlight with the white liquid liner. Now the me you're seeing here had a rough night and had to run out the door in sweating heat and film before sundown, but I came back and made some changes to film indoors. So I removed some of the paint, including the peacocks. I made my shoulders more peach coral than they were before. I re-established some white paint and re-added dots instead of swirls on my shoulder. And with the peacocks gone, I added a little bit of brightness to the foxes using the liquid suede and foiled again. Lastly, just to put on my antlers, I used these jumbo bobby pins from My Kitsch. You can see their size in comparison, and they were a lifesaver in securing these heavy antlers on my head. Alright, next for a full speed tutorial on how I made these antlers. First, I used a headband, hanger wire, and 16 gauge wire to lay out the antler shape. Then using my hot glue gun, I glue where the points meet for more stability, and I tape around the headband so I don't get scratched by wires. Next, I'm taking aluminum foil to lay out a base structure, starting from the bottom and working my way up, keeping it pretty thin because there's going to be some layers here. Then I use masking tape and go over the entire piece because more layers need to stick to something, and right now that's not possible. Then I made my own concoction of paper mache and I begin laying it out on the antlers. I lay down 2 layers of paper mache, working hard to keep it as smooth as possible, though deer antlers have some texture. Then I stop because my cat wants to boop it, so I let her try to boop, just a bit. Once the paper mache layers are on and dry, I coat the antlers with a couple coats of Mod Podge, and then I build a stabilizer with wire because I realize this bad boy is getting heavy. I spray paint the whole ordeal white. I then mix various NYX pigments and glitters with Mod Podge to make my own concoction to coat the antlers. I sprinkle this craft glue on top for a neat texture. And by neat, I don't mean smooth, I mean pretty. Then I use Mod Podge and some gold pigments from NYX to tip the antlers off and make them extra gorgeous. And I also sprinkle NYX's gold glitter all over the tips while they're still damp. Then it's time to add the flowers. I bought probably 8 different colors of flowers. I have lavenders, pinks, teals, and I kind of work in a rainbow assortment throughout, and I'm covering my little stabilizer I built as well. I opted to use leaves in place of ears because I thought that made me look more like a forest spirit. I also add butterflies and flowers to each of these antler branches. And then a final whimsical touch, I'm attaching these jewel strings to the antlers. They whack you in the face though, so be careful. And here we are finally done with my vision. These antlers took over 20 hours to complete. Alright, so that is my finished look for this round of the Face Awards. If you think I am deserving, please go over to faceawards.com and vote for me if you want to see me in the next round. I hope you all enjoyed where I got my inspiration from and like how I kind of Bethany-fied it. You know what I mean? There's like a Lisa Frank color scheme going on here. Anyhow, I thank you all so much for watching this video. I really do hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.